I had a lot of friends reaching out concerned. They were like, I didn't know you were a Christian.
Oh.
What do you mean you got baptized? Wait, are you different now? Do you think differently now?
Yeah.
I thought you liked science.
It was almost like God was saying, if you're not going to identify with me, you're not going to pretend to.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Flower and Flame podcast, where we talk about how Jesus flowers his church through his word and how the Holy Spirit unifies us and sets our hearts on fire for him. We are so glad that you are here. I'm Hannah.
I'm Savannah.
And I'm Kalen. Today, we're going to have a new topic, testimony, that we're going to be discussing. I'm going to be giving my personal testimony to you guys today, which for whoever's just randomly listening to this, you might not know what that word means in a biblical sense. So I'm going to have Hannah kind of give you a brief definition.
Yeah, so a testimony, it's a little bit distinct from a life story. So a life story is like, this is who I am as a person, how I've grown, and how what's made me stronger, all that stuff. Testimony is not just something that Christians share about their life story, but it really means witness. So it's the same word that's used to describe when a witness is on the stand, and they are speaking to a crime that's committed. You know, they're either sometimes they're giving to a character witness in defense of somebody. Sometimes they're an eyewitness to events that have happened. And so it really has more legal kind of language to it than you would think. So that's true, I think, even with Christian testimonies. It's in the sense of Jesus is essentially on the stand, and he's the one that's the defendant. And the world is throwing out all these accusations on him and letting him know, accusing him of all these things, that he's a fraud or he's a liar, he's not real or whatever. And we are giving character witnesses about Jesus. Nope. Jesus is who he says he is. He really died. He really rose again. And he's God. He's fully man and he's fully God.
Yeah.
So we're giving a witness about that. And we're saying, this is how I know that Jesus is who he says he is. This is what he's done in my life.
Yeah. God's
promises have come true and have produced fruit in my life. And let me tell you that story. So that's what a testimony is that it's really not about you, and it really is about Jesus. And all of how magnificent he is and how your life is a living witness to his power and his greatness.
It's that personal account, which is so, different from each person to person. So this is very much more of a come sit and listen. I'm going to give you my personal account of my relationship and walk and journey as a Christian, but with God, and what that kind of looks like. I'm going to give you a lot of the candid details of kind of different personal items and things, and how God's kind of worked his way through that, which when I was doing my testimony, man, the common theme I keep coming back to is curiosity. It's the curiosities I have had in life that have led me to certain places in life, away from God and back to God.
Yeah.
And it's just the cool, different places that I've seen God work in my life. But to start, I grew up being a Christian, quote unquote. I was raised in a Christian household. My mom has a Methodist background. So she grew up going to, I want to say United Methodist. I don't quite know. She moved a lot growing up. So they had to find new church homes quite often. My dad, on the other hand, did not. He went to the same church his whole childhood and grew up Church of Christ. So that was really more what I would have called my family's denomination was Church of Christ, because I think my mom didn't have as set in stone feeling about it as much as my dad, who grew up in the same church, going to the same denomination for so many years. I was born in the early 90s. I'm not going to give you my age. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you I'm a millennial. But
So you're super old.
I'm super old.
Got it.
We're ancient.
The Gen Zs are mocking
The
you right
90s is actually
How
old now.
dare you have
I
skinny
know.
jeans.
I know. And growing up in the 90s, I experienced kind of this really rose-colored, glorious childhood. I think a lot of people talk about that, especially millennials. So I had a typical suburban family, typical suburban home, relationship, nuclear family type of deal. I'm the oldest daughter. I have a younger brother. Parents are still married. We lived in a cute little house in a little neighborhood in a town where we all went to school together, right? And I, looking back, had a very blessed childhood, very blessed childhood. And there was not a thing for me to kind of look at in some way that, some people talk about in testimonies that they kind of found a point in which, their faith was tested. And that wasn't really the case for me. But really, as a child, my parents, they christened me at birth. My mom's parents.
Explain what christening is. I'm not sure all of our listeners know what that is.
That is a good point. So it was at a Methodist church. My mom's parents had, I think, christened her, is my assumption. I've actually asked my mom, and I can't remember what she had said, but I just know that I was christened because I have a christening outfit, but it's essentially more like a dedication to the Lord. It is, in some contexts, mostly Catholic, seen in a certain legalistic aspect to it. In Protestant Christianity, that's not so much so the case, though in what my parents were performing was essentially dedicating me to the Lord as a baby 6-month-old child. And I had this cute little white outfit and whatnot. My mom's got it in a little shadow box that she still keeps to this day. And my parents, that gives the context, started as that. They wanted to raise me in the Lord. They wanted to raise me in the church. And we did do that in my childhood. We did have a home church that was a Church of Christ church where we lived that we went to probably most of my childhood up to I'd say the age of 7 or 8, maybe 9. And we went there most Sundays. I remember vividly going to a Sunday school. I will say my mom also worked for a large organization. I do think I can say this. She worked for the YMCA. And in that, she was a director of youth programs like the nursery, aquatics. And so I also had weekly check-ins at the nursery where we proceeded to also have, your typical Sunday school little teachings they would do. They'd give you a coloring book and you'd color Jesus's face in different shades of yellow and orange because they didn't give us tan back in the 90s. That didn't exist.
They didn't have a light brown crayon?
Nope. There was no light brown crayon.
That sucks a lot.
So a lot of orange Jesus pictures is what I had. And a lot of Veggie Tales. So I remember doing a lot of the typical Christian childhood.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, looking from the outside in, I, in all intents and purposes, was a Christian. What they didn't see was that I had this really curious mind. I had, since the probably earliest memory I can think of, loved nature. I loved God's creation, but I didn't relate it to God. I loved the environment and science. So with that, I started finding myself interested in things like dinosaurs.
I mean, dinosaurs are cool.
And it kind of quickly was something it was the very first moment I realized that there were certain topics in my Christian circles of family and friends that some people didn't appreciate dinosaurs. Dinosaurs weren't really talked about or a thing. And I was like, oh, there's a difference.
Was it
here.
that, did you find that they just didn't want to talk about it because they didn't know a lot about it? Or was it in the was it Church of God or was it Church of Christ?
It was Church of Christ.
Church of Christ going up, that they thought that dinosaurs were heresy, that didn't actually happen?
I think a little bit of both in some ways. And also just that as a little girl, it was a little bit of a strange interest to have.
Like you should be wanting to dress up as a fairy princess and play with dolls.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And I did play with dolls plenty, but I also had like an entire kit of dinosaurs to the point where my great aunt literally like quilted a blanket for me of different dinosaurs that she looked
That's
up.
so cute.
And I have it still to this day, and I love it. And it's, so old now because I am so old now.
Right.
But
You're 45.
Yes. It was a lot of just subtle things, right? So as I'm kind of going through that, I realize, okay, there's something here. There's a thing, but I don't, as a child know what that means.
Right.
I just keep on doing the usual. Like I'm expected to go to Sunday school. I'm expected to put on my nice outfits, sit quiet in church at Sunday.
Right.
My mom will hand me something to color while the pastor talks at the front.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember being involved, though. That's the other thing I would say in my childhood is I don't ever really have a concrete point in which anyone sat down and spoke to me about the Lord in the context of what it meant to me personally.
Like what it means to know him personally.
Right.
Yeah.
It was more just assumed that I did.
Yeah.
Because I was being raised in it and everyone around me was also.
Yeah.
And I just kind of honestly did know God, but wasn't able to apply it to my own life. So I just didn't. And
kind of like he's this being
right
that exists and he created everything and you know him from like a Christian context, but you don't know him anywhere on an intimate level.
Exactly the part that that's when I'm so glad you said that because that's when it hit for me was when I had to consider not if for me now, but then the if he created everything.
Yeah.
And I want to say for a lot of people in the early 2000s, late 90s, pop culture really started to get more upfront about other beliefs and other ideologies or thoughts. And it really was something as a child in that time frame I was able to access and absorb through the internet because the internet was starting to pop off through, TV shows, which my parents did monitor what I watched, but it wasn't in the same way as other people. So that's the other point I realized there's a difference for me was I had friends who weren't allowed to watch Harry Potter. I loved Harry Potter.
I feel like
Die hard loved.
I feel like we have listeners right now
Yeah.
that are like, oh, I wish I could have watched Harry Potter, or listeners that are like those parents who never let their children watch Harry Potter.
Right.
Like it's like already hear the division.
Both sides of the spectrum.
I got to see, which, I mean, like you weren't, right? You weren't allowed to watch.
Oh yeah, Savannah, did you watch Harry Potter?
Or did you even have interest?
In our household, we definitely watched Harry Potter, but there was definitely people within the church that was like,
thought you're
that's
going to hell.
witchcraft.
Yeah.
You're going to hell.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, like not like it wasn't a salvation issue, but it was definitely like that's witchcraft.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's like, me and Luke talk about it and we're like kind of at the point where it's like
Luke is her husband.
Luke is my husband.
For context.
We kind of sit down. We're like, yes, it is witchcraft. And I don't know. We're just still kind of praying about it, whether we are going to allow it,
Allow that for your kids.
allow it for our children. It's just a whole thing. You just kind of have to be led by what you feel is right.
The
and
Holy Spirit.
Not what you feel is right. It's like how the Holy Spirit
What the Spirit is
leading
speaking to you.
So,
Yeah. And I think for me, it was my parents probably didn't take as much time and thought into it as I think people do now.
Yeah.
And to that, I am totally okay that my parents allowed me to watch Harry Potter. And I love it still. And I still consume that content. And it's not an issue for me even now as a Christian in my walk. But back then, it's a good thing to consider because it did kind of give me a different perspective.
Yeah.
Something that I was like, okay, this is interesting. This is different. And how it's being portrayed and how different people are viewing it has a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it really is something that followed me through childhood, is why I bring it up, because I was someone who was able to, see it at a young middle school age. And then it followed me all the way through my teenage years.
Yeah.
Which kind of was also the same case with how I went through my testimony in God, which I think it was right around that time frame, maybe a few years after, which I'm talking around the age of like 10 to 12. A couple of big things happened in life. At the time, I was attending a summer camp called Camp Widgewagon. For anyone who knows where that is, good for you. Hi, I was there. You can probably figure out when. But I loved that place. And it was a Christian summer camp that I would go to for 2 to 3 weeks out every summer for like 7-8 years. We would have chapel in the morning. We would have Bible teachings in the afternoon. My camp counselor would do individual discipleship with me.
That's cool.
I didn't find God though. Like, I want that to be said.
Woman discipled me. I heard chapel talks and I still didn't know who the Lord
probably
was.
heard the whole Bible in the time it took there. And yet I, again, never had someone sit down and be like, hey, so what's Jesus doing in your life?
Yeah.
Like, where are you at in your walk?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I will say in all of this. I don't know, how appropriate that would have been maybe for a child, I guess, to some extent. But it really shapes my testimony in the sense that I was curious about everything else at that summer camp. I wanted to learn archery. I learned how to ride so many different types. I was an equestrian. I learned how to ride English and Western saddles. I learned how to braid rope. I did ropes courses. I was in the aquatics program. I learned how to do all of this cool stuff. And I could not tell you what any of our chapel meetings were on or the Bible teachings.
Yeah.
I know we read the entirety of Exodus. I do vaguely remember that, but none of it stuck. And I just was there.
Yeah.
I was just there. And not to say anything bad about that. I'm sure that camp reached so many people and did so well. So my experience is not everyone's, but that was my experience.
Yeah.
And I, when my mom transitioned out from the YMCA, that left as well. And it was so heartbreaking. My mom was so sad for us because technically I had like 2 or 3 more years that I could have gone before I aged out of the camp. And I was so looking forward to that. But it was, taken from me and her. And then my uncle, her brother, was going through a lot. I had a lot of legal issues.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, became incarcerated. And also at the time, I had a very close friend who lost a parent. And so all of that was happening at this, you're hitting puberty, you're entering a school age where, kids are a bit more kind of open to things like sex, to things like, what do you believe in? What's your identity? So for the Gen Zs out there, it did start with our generation. I will say it wasn't just as talked about yet, but that did happen. And those were discussions that I remember people having.
Nothing, I want to point out, nothing's new under the sun. Things might happen more
True.
regularly. Things might be more
Ecclesiastes
acceptable
chapter 1.
as it gets closer to Jesus' second coming.
Yeah.
But even the boomers, even all the generations before us, people were having premarital sex and doing drugs and smoking and all these types of different things. So it may be getting more acceptable, but it's not new.
Correct. Yeah.
And within all of that too, this isn't either. I know my testimony feels very similar. And that's kind of where we wanted this to start for you guys, because I know this is a common experience where a lot of people will go through I live in the Bible Belt, go through their whole life hearing about God and never quite getting to know God at any point. And we're getting there to that point, guys. I have a couple of different crazy God experiences.
Can I add a comment to that? Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things about living down here is you can know so much information about God. Like you could probably recount what the gospel is. Like
I remember
or aspects of the gospel. Yeah.
I remember actively in one of the Sunday classes I went to at that Church of Christ church, learning all of these, the Old Testament and New Testament, like the books of the Bible, is a song in my head.
Yeah.
And so I could know where to flip to them. And my grandmother, I remember, made me memorize
like the Baptists know what you're talking about.
That I guess it's that.
I think
it's
the Baptists just amen.
And they
learned that
also made me memorize the page numbers in my little Bible that she had given me. So I could know which page number to turn to. And I actually knew them, but I still
didn't know. Well, I was going to say like, and it's interesting. There's a difference between knowing something up here and knowing something in here. The difference between head knowledge and what we call heart knowledge. And head knowledge is here's a bunch of information. I can recite facts to you. Like, you know, I can tell you guys facts about yourself that you've told me. Like I know your favorite childhood cartoon was Rugrats.
Right.
That's what you learned. And so I can recount that, but it's a whole other thing to be like, I know you on a personal level, and to know someone with intimacy requires relationship. Yeah. And so like, you know, Kalen, I've known you since 2013 and we've been friends the whole time. And so there are things about you that I'm going to know that other people may not know as well, because I've literally done an element of life with you for on and off for many, many years. Yeah. And that's a knowing in here. The Hebrew word for that kind of knowing is called yada. If you ever hear like the Yiddish phrase, yada, 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 it's, I know.
That comes from?
It's, I know. Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. So yada is a knowing of intimacy. It's the same word that's used to describe the way a husband and a wife know each other of like a sexual intimate level. It's the deepest sort of knowing that there is. And then the Greek version of that is called gnosko, which is a knowing that is intimate and goes beyond just like head knowledge. And so sometimes it can be really hard to gnosko Jesus, having grown up in the South down here, because Christianity is so inundated in our culture. Yeah. And there's this idea that like, because I know facts about God, I'm a Christian, and you don't realize that like, you still have this emptiness in your heart. You may still have this emptiness in your heart that can only be filled with Jesus, and you don't yada him. You don't gnosko him. It's not the case when I was living in California. It's the total opposite. Like these kids have no idea. When my husband and I were doing full time, we used to be missionaries to high school students in urban high schools. And so those kids have barely heard of Jesus. Like they know Jesus is the Christian God. They don't know, they've never heard the gospel. They don't know anything. And so you come and you tell them the gospel, and like these kids are hurting, and they have known the deepest level of poverty, and they have known all kinds of just terrible, terrible family situations. You come and you share the gospel with them, and they're like, why has no one ever told me this before?
It hits different.
But what stands in the way of people yada-ing Jesus or gnoskoing Jesus down here is the head knowledge. It's the sneakiest crap that Satan pulls.
And it's so, again, you're just hitting all the good points, because my gnosko was science. My gnosko was developing into, I was obsessed with Crocodile Hunter.
I mean, Steve Irwin for the win.
My parents let me watch his funeral.
Oh.
Like I was so genuinely down for Crocodile Hunter, anything,
Kalen, that does
Discovery
not
Channel, Animal Planet.
You.
People still to this day is like, who is your hero? Steve Irwin. That's who
cute.
I say. Loved that man.
Steve Irwin was amazing.
I wept when I heard about his death, and just it was so, so sad because even though he was this personality on television, he was probably one of the first television personalities who made conservation science, anything like that, relatable to people.
Yeah.
And especially as a child. So like, I think a whole generation of kids can say that. And we all therefore hyper fixated on Animal Planet and Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
Hence me. Like Shark Week die hard here.
I love Shark Week.
Even though it's not my favorite anymore. It's kind of turned into this whole thing. But like that was just things I enjoyed watching. And my parents actually was like, well, it's educational. Let's just, I'm sure it's fine. So they let me watch it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I wanted to like tie that back to, of like the different things I would hear, the media, the different like spheres. It was all these small things. It was all small things. It was never this one big moment that was like, God's not real. It was just all these little things that kind of
accumulation
put together in my head. And then it was tested. Then it was tested. And I still struggle with this as now I've been longer in my walk with knowing whether that was God being curious of me and kind of giving me moments to find him, or if it was
by God being curious of you, you mean him like kind of calling you and drawing your curiosity towards him?
Yes. Yeah. Or if it was Satan being curious of how he could pull me away. Or both. That's something
it could be a scheme that like Genesis 50:20 says, with the enemy, what you intend for evil, God intends for good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really going through that in my head is like, oh, that like, it's almost like that's where that dichotomy actually does come from, is the angel on your shoulder and devil on your shoulder kind of thing. Yeah. So that's kind of said in the Bible as that dichotomy. But for me, living through that as a young child and looking back on it now as an adult in the faith. But as I go through those events in life, things start to get a little bit back to normal once I start to get towards like high school age. However, as I get to high school, I have these very specific moments that happen. First is a trip to Washington, D.C., which of course, when I went to D.C., the only thing I was excited for, other than honestly seeing the Capitol, I was super excited to see our nation's capital, but was the museums. I was so excited to see all of the museums.
I mean, the Smithsonian,
all of the science.
Chef's kiss.
Like the pinnacle of science.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my favorite, of course, was going to be the Natural History Museum.
Right.
I wanted to see the Natural History Museum. And they had an exhibit there on Lucy. For those that don't know, Lucy is a hominid, which is a prehistoric human, which we don't have time to discuss that in a biblical sense. So we're not going to go there. That's besides the point here, guys. The point is that I knew what that was as a teenager because of my obsessions with science. My grandparents, who were devout Christians in Church of Christ, did not. We get to this museum, and I remember vividly being so excited to go see this exhibit and wanting to go see all of the like fossils and dinosaur bones and just everything that it had in it that I had fantasized over.
Yeah.
And I remember my grandparents sat on the bench at the front, and I just thought they were tired. Genuinely. I was like, we've been walking all day. DC's hot. There's not a lot of shade out here. They're tired. But it wasn't until my mom told me later, like, hey, can you, like, I had taken some time in this museum, and my mom was like, just, take your time. So I know you're excited, but like, we probably should get going. Your grandparents are ready to leave. And I didn't quite understand what she meant. And I was very just like, okay, I mean, why? We've barely seen it. I mean, do they want to come just walk around with me? And they're like, no, Kalen, they don't really want to see any of this. I was like, oh. And then it dawned on me. And it wasn't anything, again, like I totally understand from my grandparents' point of view.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't something that they like agreed with. And it was the first moment where I was like, I either agree with this or I don't. Because the people I had known in faith walking in it were right there. Yeah. That was they had been Christians their whole life, going to the same church, sitting in those pews every Sunday, devout. But they wouldn't walk around that museum. So I was like, well, I think I'm already too deep. So I guess I know where I sit on my sideline.
Mm.
So that was the first. The second being, I had a few friends from that Church of Christ church I went to in my hometown, not my grandparents, but a different one, who were going to some teen nights at that church. You know, they got, you know, we were all getting around to the age of 14. So they then start aging into that youth group teen environment. And the teen nights they started in this new building that they had at that church. And they invited me. So I started going because, to be honest, this is a theme in my testimony, is that people who were very much Christ-like were people I was always drawn to. Mm-hmm. I would always be drawn to them. Mm-hmm. Even though I had plenty of friends who weren't. And a lot of that comes from being interested in a lot of different things. I think, as like I said, people start finding their identities and who they are. A lot of my friends ended up being the weird outcasts. I was a weird outcast over here being obsessed with Steve Irwin, doing Harry Potter things, listening to emo music. Me, them. So a lot of us weren't really like in the Christian crowd per se. But I was drawn to that crowd because they were seemingly put together. Perfect. Like they just had this vibe that was right. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be their friend for some reason. Mm-hmm. So I went to these teen nights, got involved, enjoyed it. Same as it had been.
Can I add a verse for that?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't planning on pulling out the Bible.
While you do that, I was going to say, like, it was the same structure that I was used to with, you have chapel with some singing, there's a biblical teaching, some people take notes, some just sit there. And then at the end, they have the little like community stuff and information that they come together on. So I, for the most part, was like, all right, I know this song and dance.
Yeah.
So I didn't ever feel like I had to worry about my doubts. And at this point, to give context, I didn't have a perfect moment in my mind of like, I'm not a Christian. Like it didn't have a moment of just saying I wasn't a Christian.
Right.
Yet. But I had doubts is the best way to put it.
Yeah. You were talking about how you really were drawn to Christians and there was something about them that you really wanted. Paul talks about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 to 16. But thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To one, a fragrance from death to death. To the other, a fragrance from life to life. Who is sufficient for these things? Mm. So this idea that like what you were recognizing in your friends was the aroma of Jesus and it was life-giving to you. Mm-hmm. There was something that smelled so good about what God was doing in the lives of your friends and you didn't know how to put your finger on it. It was something that was not cerebral. It was something spiritual.
And it's funny you say that because I don't think they were aware of it either.
Not at all.
And they genuinely were nice to me, but in context, they weren't actively pursuing me in the way that later in life I did experience. Yeah. So at least in this moment, I, again, had a dichotomy going on where I was invited to go to the summer conference with that group. So they were like, all right, everyone, we're going to go to Impact, which is a summer conference at a university. And that, you know, everyone was going. And I had been going to these teen nights, so it kind of seemed weird if I didn't. Mm-hmm. And they were very much like, we're wanting everyone to go. It's going to be great. And at this point, I hadn't had any type of like major conversation about my current status is the best way, I guess, to phrase it. So I just was like, all right, well, this is more intimate. I'm a little hesitant, but I think I should go.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. Never had been to one before. Summer camp is as close as I could get. So I just was picturing that, really. So I had no idea. No clue. I go and it's like front to back, wall to wall, like full blown production. There's like 1,000+ attendees. All of these kids are like on the Jesus freak hype train that drink Kool-Aid.
Nothing like a 90s Christian high school conference.
Oh, buddy. Hype train.
Y2K at its finest.
So hype for it. And I am washed up in it, man. like, when I don't mean that in a bad way, actually a good way of like, it hit me of like, wow, what is this?
Yeah.
What is going on? And at this point, I'm like 15.
Yeah.
And I go in, and the first night out the gate, we had whole, the conference talks, the teachings, the different breakout sessions, the different activities that each group would do. They had like this cute little competition between different churches going on of like how many people can do certain activities, like kind of like minute to win it style, because minute to win it was popular at the time. So I was having a blast. And then the final night breakout session happens, which for most of you who've been to things like this, you know what I'm talking about, where everyone sits down and this is the moment where the tissue boxes come out. And everyone is expected to open their heart.
The last night of conference.
And cry. No, I mean, they did this every night. There were 3 nights. This was every night. I don't know if that's maybe not normal.
No, that's normal. Yeah, that's normal.
But the first night they were like, we want this to be something that people can, see progression.
Yeah.
So if someone is struggling, we want you to say it. Like, this is the floor. It's yours. So people were popping in and chatting about it. Like, they were like, y'all, I have sinned. Like, it was a confession night. And
that's really cool.
I was sitting there and I was like, have I sinned? Do I know what that is? Do I know what sin is? Have I sinned?
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't think of any. Well, maybe. So it genuinely was like putting my head on a spin. And the youth pastor noticed. So we had a conversation afterwards, and he was like, I don't think you've really ever had anyone discuss this with you before. And he was kind of like, yeah. And at like 15, he was like, this has not been talked to you yet. This is strange. And I think he had known I'd been to this church before, like my family had gone and things like that.
Yeah.
And I clarified to him. I was like, no, I do know what it is. It's just a matter of like, I don't know where I am. And that's the moment where he was like, oh, you don't know where you are with God. And I was like, oh, yeah, I haven't said that to anyone. And it was because of shame.
Yeah.
I said it without knowing it. Yeah. I was in fear.
Yeah.
I was in fear.
Like, if I confess this, they will ostracize me.
Or think bad of my family.
Yeah.
Or think bad of
They'll
the people
shame my
around
family.
me.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm the eldest daughter, protect this, die on that hill kind of personality. Still am die on that hill personality.
Almost convinced there will at least be 1 or 2 listeners that have completely felt the fear, currently feeling the same way.
That they can't say it because like of what it could do for the others behind them. And and that was me. And so I held it tight in me and just told myself I will be who I want to be on the backside, but I can't let that be known. Yeah. And this pastor, though, met me with such compassion. Oh, amazing. To this moment, I won't say his name, but if you ever see this, you were amazing. And genuinely, it has no bearing on what I'm about to say on what you did for me in that moment. But we'll get there, because unfortunately, that was not my salvation moment. But he at least tried. Yeah.
I mean,
he did try.
Our job is only to like plant seeds, right? Like, correct. Whether like they grow, like that's God's job.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously God was calling you into a relationship with himself, and he used that pastor to plant a seed in you.
And it was the first moment I was curious. Yeah. And in that I was open.
Yeah. And so work was done there for later.
That was absolutely the Holy Spirit.
That's probably it. Yeah. The seed was being sown.
And it grows underneath the soil for a while.
This is one that's a little hard to say out loud. So for those who hear it that know about this part of my life, like I don't, it's a little hard to say. But at the end of the conference was a Sunday, and on the Sunday they do baptisms. Yeah. I connected so deeply with this pastor through the conference, through the talks, that I signed up to be baptized that Sunday. Yeah. And they called my parents. They were so excited. Because at this point, we had stopped going every Sunday to that church as a family. Because I had a lot of different sports activities. My brother had sports activities. We became that busy suburban family that's too busy to go to a typical Sunday service. I was a creaster. We would go on holidays. We would go a lot on the holidays, or go every so often to families churches, my grandparents' churches, but we didn't go as consistent.
Yeah.
To the church that I was at the conference with. And my parents were just, I think, excited for me to be plugged in because of that.
Yeah.
So I was therefore like, oh my gosh, I've made them proud, right?
Yeah.
So it all felt right. It all felt so right. And I remember being baptized, and I remember being so overwhelmed and crying, and it was a big moment, and everyone hugged me and was there for me. And then we left. And then Monday comes. And at this point, Facebook's a thing, guys. And I saw that one of the girls from the conference had posted of my baptism and tagged me. I had a lot of friends reaching out, concerned. They were like, I didn't know you were a Christian.
Oh.
What do you mean you got baptized? Wait, are you different now? Do you think differently now?
Yeah.
I thought you liked science.
Because obviously science and God cannot be one and the same.
And I had some really good close...
Which is not true.
Well, yeah.
For clarification.
Yeah.
Continue.
But at the time...
But at the time, in
At
your
the
world,
time-
they were opposite.
And for a lot of other people, it was
For
the
sure.
same thing.
For many people in the church and outside the church, they feel very mutually exclusive.
And the people that were at this conference were not my close friends.
Yeah.
They were just people I liked.
Right.
And I wanted to go with. And then my close friends knew them and
Yeah.
were like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Go have fun. I think a lot of my close friends were like, well, your family's Christian. They would send you anyway or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it was the baptism that like they were like, whoa, what?
That feels extreme.
That's weird for you.
Hmm.
That's weird for you. And I was like kind of in a panic because I felt like I was living a double life.
Can I add to that real quick?
Mhm.
Part of that is because baptism, the sacrament of baptism, is the public declaration that you have died with Christ and are buried with him, going under the water if you're a dunker. But literally being buried with him in his death and being resurrected back to life with his resurrection. And so it's not something you have to do all the time. It's something that you do one time, but it's public. And so it's interesting to me, like you do this in front of the church too, but it's interesting to me that it's your like unbeliever friends that kind of understood that. And they looked that you did this baptism as this public declaration, even though you weren't expecting to be tagged on Facebook in it, but you did this public declaration and they knew that was more significant than saying, I go to church.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting thing.
A very God thing.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to see the things that God like uses.
Yeah.
That were completely me also denouncing him because I did.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing. And there are plenty of listeners on here that's why this is hard for me to say, because I will not lie, because that's a sin. But I committed a sin, guys. And in that moment when all those different people were coming, I had like a specific conversation. And this was the moment, the turning point in my life where the conversation I had with a friend was about that moment. And essentially we kind of devolved it down to, you drank the Kool-Aid, you were brainwashed, don't worry about it. That meant nothing. And I agreed. And therefore in that moment I denounced God and chose at that moment, that was the moment I chose that I was actually agnostic and I was not a Christian. Because
did that feel more authentic to you?
yes.
Okay.
And made sense is what I gnoskoed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, even though I had a great time and felt a connection there and genuinely heard what people were teaching, probably for the first time, I still didn't gnosko God because it was 3 days.
But you were like, since God and science are enemies, I can't betray the one I'm really married to, which is science, for God.
Yep. And
wow.
I didn't know enough. And the community was temporary. So the community I was with was temporary at the time, because after that, summer goes, right? And you kind of lose contact with some friends because people get busy and go on different vacations and different things. So I lost contact with a lot of those people. We get back to school. I get a new boyfriend. Some of those people also feel weird about that because I'm dating. I also was not being very Christian in my dating life at all. And people found out and knew. And those people were like, she ain't a real Christian.
Yeah.
They clocked it immediately. And I don't know this for sure. I don't know. But I could tell, and I heard rumors and whisperings of people who are like, yeah, Kalen needs to go back with that group. That's where she needs to be. And so I was like, all right, that's where I'm going to stay now. All right. Bye. So I lost contact with a lot of those people.
Yeah.
And a few of them weren't that way at all, though.
Yeah.
A few of them weren't at all. But they were also the ones that were in sin.
Yeah.
So it was funny because it was like they weren't that way. But looking back now as a Christian, I was like, but they were also the ones probably beside me doing certain things that were sinful.
Yeah.
And I just decided at that point, I'm going to operate by my own moral code. My own agnostic moral code, which looked a lot like the Bible. Funny enough, actually.
Can I add a verse to that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's only one verse. I'm turning to it now, and there we go. The last verse of the book of Judges.
They did what was right in their own.
I feel like I quote this too much.
I know exactly what you're about to say.
I already know where I'm turning.
It's
It's Judges 21:25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah.
But this idea that essentially what you were saying is that I'm going to be my own God.
Yes.
Morality is what seems right to myself. And so if we deny the Lord as king, then we are operating out of our own independent understanding, which Proverbs ad nauseum talks about how that leads to folly. This is why Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding, because our hearts are just, like Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 17:9, our hearts are incredibly deceitfully wicked. And so you chose to be your own God and build your own morality around that. And kind of essentially what the time was saying, this is the hill I'm going to die on.
And it was so weird to do that because I was based on that.
Yeah.
Because I was raised learning it. That was how I was morally raised.
Yeah.
So honestly, my own moral code was that of the Bible. I just wouldn't recognize that it was God. And it wasn't because I was angry with God at any point. It wasn't because I actively looked at God and said, that's a bad dude.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just like, I doubt that you're real. And I fear you. And I fear that I can't have certain things if I am a Christian. So therefore, I will not be one.
Yeah.
Thanks. Not for me.
Yeah.
And I went that way throughout the rest of high school. So I had different relationships, different boyfriends. And it's so funny because there were so many opportunities for me to truly go down a dark path and experience very sinful things. And I swear to you, I think God just was upset that I was like, that wasn't my moment in high school, and death gripped me and was like, well, I'm not, you're not going to go too far from me. And I went to a lot of raves in high school, never did any drugs.
Wow.
Never hooked up with anybody.
Props to you.
Never stayed out past my curfew. My parents knew what time I would be gone, knew I'd be back at 2 a.m., but I'd be back at 2 a.m., kept my phone on.
Curfew in high school?
You got a 2.
I was 18.
Oh, I was like, wow, you have cool parents.
No, I was 18. But like
curfew.
living at home 18, right?
No, I get it.
But prior to that, I still went to a few raves and concerts with friends that I would have to be home at midnight because that was the curfew was midnight, but still would do that. My mom let me go do a senior prank on my high school where we all camped out on the lawn of our high school. And she was like, just don't get arrested, please. And she just trusted me. And I didn't. There were people who vandalized the high school. You know what I did? with a bunch of other students who panicked. We cleaned the vandalism off the high school.
I believe that about you.
I do believe that about you.
I panicked and was like, y'all defaced.
As a plea, if the cops showed up, we didn't have nothing to do with this. We're cleaning.
I was so mad at them. I was like, guys, this is our high school.
This is a felony.
you guys drew awful things on the walls. I'm going to clean it. And did. And like, just the different things in life that I look back on and I'm like so some of the people I had known from my Church of Christ church, we all, do things in high school. We all have things that happen. But I remember I ended up having the party with these people. And I think there was underage drinking happening at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that moment, I remember that I was like, don't get drunk.
Yeah.
Be safe.
Yeah. Go
to sleep in the bed you're supposed to go to sleep in. And then don't drive. And I remember being like the mom overseeing things with it.
Yeah.
And
that's completely you.
It was just, but in no way was I operating in any part of the Holy Spirit, I know.
Yeah.
But I feel like now I look back and I'm like, I just feel like God was there and was kind of like, Kalen, you know what's right. Kalen, this is what's Kalen. And just helping me. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Because it preserved a lot that when I became a Christian, I'm so glad was preserved.
Yeah.
Should not have been. Yeah. I put myself in plenty of positions where that should not be the case.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I'm like, it's a testament to the Lord. But I went through all of that, lived life, did the whole thing. And then we get to the point where we go to college. And I'm moving away from home for the first time. My parents see me as a responsible young adult. I believe at this point, from what I have gotten from my parents, they still thought I was Christian. They were still kind of thinking that I was just, we would have been busy in life. I'm young, that kind of thing. You go through those periods, right? Mm-hmm. But for all intents and purposes, Christian. They didn't know. They didn't know that I had already mentally checked out and said, nah. They didn't know. And because I was obedient and going to church when they asked.
Yeah.
And I was obedient and doing the Christian things. Just I would not ascribe to the title.
Yeah.
And as I was going to college, I have an older friend who went to college in the town that I now live in and went to college in. And she was here for about a year or two. And I came to visit and fell in love. Fell in love with this town. Loved this town.
It's pretty great.
Loved this town.
I do love this town.
It had so much nature for me as a scientist to be a part of. It had all of these cool outdoor things. It had all of these science coolie vibes that I loved. Get weird was literally a slogan for the city for a while. Or stay weird.
Yeah.
It was stay weird,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
as a nature person, isn't it true that this is the only national park town?
It's the National Park City now. First National Park City of America.
Quick Google search and you can figure out
You'll
where
figure out
we
where we are.
Anyway.
But regardless, I remember her, me and her were very close and wanted to be in the same town going to school again together. Yep. However, she, for various reasons, was moving back to our hometown and going to college there that same year that I would have started.
Yeah.
And I did not want to stay in my hometown. I did not want to go to school there. I didn't even apply. I was like, I really want to go here. Even though I know you're not going to be here and it broke my heart, I want to be here. And so she understood, which was so cool. However, she was like, okay. She's like an older sister to me. She was like, I can't let you go here without knowing at least some good people, because it's college. Things get crazy. And she, in her last year of school, had made some pretty good friends with 4 other women that she had met. And I can't remember if it was through a class or through Ultimate Frisbee. I don't really remember actually how she met them, but she'd gotten close with them. And she was like, I'm going to introduce you during move-in week. I'll help you move in. Because thankfully our school schedule is she was later than me for some reason or other. So she was going to be able to help me move in and get to know them a little bit. So she helped me move in and stayed with me those first few days in my dorm room and introduced me to these 4 women that she'd met, all of which were around 2 years older than myself. And she was like, now, I need to tell you something. They're Christians. They're probably going to invite you to this thing called Bible study.
Oh my gosh.
And it's okay because they know that we're not Christians. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, I kind of looked at her sideways like, is this a cult? And she was like, it's not a cult. I swear. It's not a cult. And they're just good people. That was all she would say. She was like, they're just good people. And I know that they will be good people to you. They've been good people to me. And they were totally cool, she said, with her going to, their Bible study and not being a Christian, and they knew. And she had already told them I wasn't.
Great.
So they already knew I wasn't. I was like, okay, well, they already know. So my personal secret is just out there for people I already haven't met in college. Great. Yay. Because I really and truly was like, oh, I have immediately got that. Outed. Yeah. Felt that way a little bit. But that's okay. Like, genuinely, it's okay. Because I probably would have come about either way. But it, again, felt like a God moment. Because it was done for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have to take off that mask.
Yeah.
The mask was gone from day one.
Yeah.
There was no opportunity to wear the mask.
Right.
Nope. It was gone. And I would have worn that thing tight.
It was almost
glued it to my face.
It was almost like God was saying, if you're not going to identify with me, you're not going to pretend to.
Yeah.
Yep, probably. And that's where I met a young woman who, in the Bible studies they do, were a part of a campus Christian ministry.
Mm-hmm.
In the campus Christian ministries, the older women would host a Bible study for freshman women.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all, I believe, like juniors. Maybe 1 or 2 were seniors.
Yeah.
And one of the 4 women was a junior, and she was starting a freshman women's Bible study. And my friend didn't know that at the time. She was like, it's a Christian women's Bible study, but like I think we didn't know the dichotomy, right? We didn't know the dynamics. But I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And the girl was like, hey, I have a Bible study for women your age. Would you want to come just to meet some people? Like, get to know some people your age at college. I know this isn't your thing. I know that may not be for you, but like, do you just want to come like meet some people? Anyone's welcome. And I was like, I guess so.
Yeah.
And the thing that changed it for me was I had 2 friends. One who didn't know me very well, but I didn't realize she and I had very similar testimonies. And she was interested too. And it was speaking to her in that moment. And then another who knew I wasn't a Christian.
Yeah.
And also was not.
Yeah.
And the both of them said, you know what, let's go.
Yeah.
They were willing. And I was like, okay, took a deep breath. I need to be willing. Let's go. And so we did. And y'all, I met my community. I met it that day, literally that day. And it stayed with me, and it's still here for over 10 years. And they walked through the Bible with me. I had that same emotion that I had back when I was 15 at Impact come here, but it wasn't temporary.
Yeah.
And neither was God in that moment. I actually learned over the next 3 or 4 months more about the Bible. We walked through Jonah. It's one of the first books we did, which is so sweet for our listeners to hear that as a Bible study now that's, taking place. We've also done Jonah. So it just has a special place in my heart, but we did that. And I learned a lot about that and myself with that, being like, well, I've had plenty of my Jonah moments.
Yeah.
And, put my head on a table and try to figure out how a man can survive in the belly of a whale as a scientist, right?
Right.
And I remember, to give like the end of my testimony, I sat in a room ready to accept Christ in my life. And I looked at, it wasn't my Bible study leader, but a woman who was a missionary for the campus college ministry who sat down with me. And this missionary, she very profound in faith, very astute, was willing to talk to me about my doubts.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, I don't hate God. I'm not angry with God. This was the first moment at 18, 19 years old that I finally was like, I just doubt. I just don't know. And she was like, yeah, you don't know. And she gave me Matthew 7:7-11, which is the ask, seek, knock verse. Yeah. But it is ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? And she was just like, have you asked God about your doubts? Have you sought?
Yeah.
Thank you. Have you sought God on this? Have you asked? Have you knocked on the door? And that was the first moment I realized what prayer meant. And then that's when it connected. I was at the moment of what is prayer? What is seeking? What is knocking? I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
So I finally...
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. We can edit this.
Yeah.
My medication.
All good.
That's fine. We can edit.
Yeah.
But so...
asking, seeking, knocking. What prayer is.
In that moment, I realized that as I wanted to ask more, I had to start with asking God into my heart.
Yeah, I love that. That's
and
so good, Kalen.
It wasn't even something that the, missionary at the time had asked me to do.
Right.
I just told her, I was like, I have to ask him first, don't I? And she was like, yeah. And she was like, I'm not even going to walk you into this. You know what you need to do. And so at that moment in a college cafeteria in a weird bench seat in front of a bunch of other students that were just all like studying, I'm over here weeping in a corner with her. They don't know what's going on. I'm having a whole moment. I asked for God to enter my heart.
That's
and
so
that's what I consider my salvation moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
And from there, my journey kind of continues. I was a part of that campus ministry for, 4 or 5 years. I graduated, met my husband through it. I've had lifelong friends through it. My faith has maintained through it. And now I'm a part of a beautiful women's Bible study and ministry. And I'm just so excited to be here with you guys. Key thing. And we will end this here for all testimonies and things for you guys. At no point in time do we say that everyone's testimony ends with a perfect bow. I have had plenty.
It ends in heaven with the perfect bow.
It ends in heaven
not end this side
with
of
the
eternity.
perfect bow. So I have had plenty of continued doubts, continued trials and tribulations, continued difficulties, questions, plenty of things I still struggle with the Lord. And that might be infinite for forever. I don't know. But at no point in time have I felt like it has drawn a wedge between me and God anymore. And as a Christian's testimony, mine will change over time and grow with me as it should. And so it's continuing on. It doesn't end here. It'll be on and on and on, but to give you guys the glimpse of how I at least came to find God and what he's done for me in my life, that's me. That's my testimony.
Kalen, that's so good.
That's so beautiful.
When you were talking about I need to invite Jesus in, I thought about this verse in Revelation chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. Those whom I love, this is Jesus speaking. Those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. So be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. The one who conquers, this is verse 21, the one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Verse 22, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Holy Spirit says to the churches. And I love that, like this idea that Jesus was standing at the door of your heart and he was knocking, but you had to make the decision, if I'm going to open the door and invite him inside. And I love that your story like is a several years wrestling journey. And there were like, for a long time, you felt like you could not believe in God and science. For the record, she believes in God and science.
I do.
Because God made science. But we'll talk about that another time. But anyway, you didn't have to sacrifice like the things that you realized you didn't have to sacrifice the things that you love about science and the ways that God has made you. I mean, God uses all your scientific knowledge in our Bible study all the time, but you didn't have to sacrifice that, but you needed to open your hands and open your heart and say, I will not seek to just know these things. I will not seek in the sense of I'll decide what's right. I'm going to invite you in and let you lead me and walk and shepherd me through these doubts. Yeah. I've got one question before we close out. What's your favorite thing about Jesus? What does Jesus mean to you now?
The first word that just came to mind was friend, because I think so many things for me had been relational and about friendships, and being the ultimate friend is truly what I needed.
Yeah.
But more than that, really and truly, I think it's loving. And that's to say that I still have struggles and doubts and plenty of things and sin and all these things that come with being a human being on earth.
Yeah.
And yet at no point in time do I not feel loved. Mm-hmm. So I'd say for me, it's that now more than anything.
That's cool. The foundation is now intimate relationship.
Yeah.
The foundation is now yada and gnosko. And that informs what you learn about God cerebrally.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Savannah, do you have any other thoughts before we close out?
No. I just want to say I think it's really cool how God never left. Like, you can look back on your testimony and point out, like, even when you weren't walking with him, even when you had, renounced him, like, you can still very clearly see his presence. And that's how it is, like, in the entire world. Like, we truly don't know what it is to be outside of the presence of God, which is, truly beautiful. To bring it back to the gospel a little bit, we don't know until we die. And you make the decision, if you die without Jesus and go to hell, then you'll know what it is to be without the presence of God. Yeah. But we really don't know what it is to be without the presence of God. And I just want to say, like, how merciful it was of God to protect you in those formative years, even when you weren't actively, seeking. And just, like, how cool it is, like, to see just who you are as a person and to relate it now as, like, what your spiritual gifts are.
Yeah.
And, like, just to see how they were just naturally popping out, and now you get to, like, cultivate them for, like, kingdom work. Yes. That's really cool.
That's very cool.
Awesome. All right, ladies. Okay. So if you loved today's conversation and you have watched us on YouTube, go ahead and like and comment and subscribe. Put something in the comments that you could resonate with in Kalen's story. Like, if something in her story stood out to you, let us know. We want to know. We literally want to get to know you. I mean, again, most of our subscribers right now are our friends and at my house every week for Bible study. But if you're not someone that we know as well, please, fill us in on your story. If you found us on either podcast sites like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure that you subscribe and leave a review below. And finally, if something about Kalen's testimony was encouraging to you today, share this episode with a friend. If you have a friend who's struggling with doubt right now and feels like, I can't follow Jesus and have doubt, send them this testimony, because this would be really powerful for them for sure. We want you guys to know how much Jesus loves you and how he has a purpose for you in the church. So we're thankful that you chose to spend this time with us. And as we head out, don't forget, If you root yourself deep in God's word and let the Holy Spirit ignite and lead you, then you will be able to grow and thrive wherever he plants you. See you soon.
Bye.